It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten, and we've got a special guest today joining us, Anthony Gomes. Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Pete. It's great to be in this wonderful blues rock nerdom. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, Willie and I are both definitely glad to have you. We're going to kick things off with touring. Now, it's 2021. Thankfully, 2020 is over. Everyone's glad to see that gone. Yes. But now we've got a vaccine. It's going a little slowly, but it gives some hope. So as far as touring, you being a touring musician, are you optimistic now that possibly you can start touring in 2021?
You know, the funny thing is people write on a daily basis, so when are you going to be in Atlanta? I have no idea. You know, when are you going to be on the East Coast? I don't know. But I am very optimistic, and I think it's going to be a slow burn, especially this summer with outdoor shows. I think that's going to enable larger shows to happen, even with social distancing. And I think by the fall, that's maybe where we might see touring getting back closer to what it once was. So I'm super stoked. I know some people that have some connections with some of the larger bands that are touring, and maybe 2021 may not be, we may not see a lot of big touring acts. And they're talking about some interesting things. One is a $50 insurance charge. So if you go to a big show, they may tack on a service fee of $50 just in case somebody gets sick. These are some of the ideas that we're throwing around. Another one is they may not let you in unless you're vaccinated. Yeah. And you'll have something on your phone and you can swipe that. So that's sort of some of the, who knows, this could be a moot point in 6 or 9 months. This is the landscape of January 2021.
Right. Let me ask Anthony, in general, because I don't really know the logistics of this. So when you're thinking about touring, at the very soonest from when you decide that, hey, it's Ollie Ollie oxen free and we feel that it's a reasonable chance to try and make this happen, how soon ahead of that date do you have to start booking these shows, getting all the different people who work in the crew, the band and everything together? So what's the lead time?
A minimum of 6 weeks if you're trying to do any sort of promotion. In a perfect world, 3 months. And I guess the larger the act, usually you'll need more lead time just to get the word out, and promote it, sell some tickets.
One thing I want to ask you with blues rock as a genre, it's not so many acts who are playing big arenas and things like that. You've got a lot of acts that are playing in smaller clubs. Do you think that's going to help blues rock as a genre and the artists kind of get back on the road sooner?
Absolutely. I would say a typical blues rock show is several hundred people. Okay, so if you go see Walter Trout, there's about 300 people. Well, you can put Walter in a room that holds 1,000 and still make a show. It's sort of hard to figure out what to do with Elton John and 40,000 people. Where are you going to put an act like that, or the Rolling Stones, or something of that nature? So I think it will help acts of our stature. Our audience size being a bit smaller, that will help us get out sooner.
Now, when you go ahead and so let's say, and I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but if you start touring for Containment Blues a little later than you'd like, and you already come out with some new material, how are you going to squeeze all that in? Are you going to go with the idea of, hey, I'd really like to tour behind Containment Blues? Or are you just going to say, hey, whatever music I have out, that's what I'm going to play, along with some of the old classics, along with some of the covers? Or are you going to try to make sure you get all your newer music heard?
That'd be a great question to ask the fans. What do you guys want to hear? I think that Containment Blues was very much a period album. It's very different from anything I've done and maybe will ever do in the future. And I think that is sort of a little snapshot in a moment in time. So I'm looking forward to the next album, and I hope that when we're back out there, we could tour in support of Rock and Roll Bluesman, which is what we're working on now, which is more of what we do, which is light stuff on fire, and yeah, more rocking. So, but I am looking forward to playing a couple of those songs because they are very personal, and we'll try to find the right balance. But whatever the fans want, we're happy to deliver.
So recently on Blues Rock Review, we put out an article, the top 10 blues rock guitarists of the 1970s. And there was an interesting response. It got a lot of comments and a lot of people talking. And I think everybody has their own list. Obviously, it's a subjective thing determining who the top 10 blues rock guitarists of the 1970s would be. Anthony, I know this is kind of an era that you're very fond of. Who are some of those guys, some of those guitar players from the 1970s that really stick out to you? Who are your favorites from that era?
Okay, my list. Number
Yes.
143. To me, the guy that doesn't get any recognition these days is Ritchie Blackmore. I think Ritchie, maybe his personality was difficult for some people, and they sort of shunned him because he said some less than flattering things of other guitar players of renown. But I think that Ritchie is in almost a league by himself. He's such a wonderful player. And the 70s is blues rock heaven. I mean, it's the golden era. So you've got, of course, the usual suspects, right? Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, Free, Paul Kossoff, what a wonderful guitar player. Jimi Hendrix dies in 1970, and his legacy is still felt. Eddie Van Halen comes out in 1978, rewrites the book for blues rock guitar and takes it into the stratosphere. Then you also have, what's interesting is a lot of rock guys are influenced by the blues, but you also have blues people like Freddie King that's now getting influenced by rock and roll, and it's Shelter recordings. Burglar is a great album from the mid 70s, and a lot of blues rock people cite this album. Buddy Guy, I mean, he was born to rock, and his output in the 70s isn't that great, but he's still out there defining the genre. So yeah, Carlos Santana, David Gilmour. Yeah, I've got a huge list, but Rory Gallagher, another guy who was tearing up the stages. So yeah, those are my top 25.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Paul Kossoff. That was one name that wasn't on our list, who I actually thought probably should have deserved to be there. He has some really great stuff with Free, obviously. And then he put out a really cool solo album, Backstreet Crawler. That's like a great guitar album.
Yeah, Paul was definitely, I can really hear B.B. King in his playing. And he took it to that other place, and it's too bad he left too soon, like a lot of guitar players, because I think he would have created some amazing music, and maybe him and Paul Rodgers might have got back together down the road. That could have been exciting.
Anthony, if I throw out a couple names here, maybe you can tell me whether you think they belong in the pantheon, or maybe they belong in the pantheon of great guitar players, but maybe not great blues influenced guitar players. What do you think about a couple names like Joe Walsh and Frank Zappa?
Amazing and genius. Yeah, those were guys that sort of crossed my mind, and they were, do you include somebody like that? John McLaughlin. There's other folks too, like Neil Schon, who was with Santana, and then Journey, a wonderful guitar player, but maybe somebody that might be in the gray area of blues rock. Peter Green, another great one in Fleetwood Mac. Frank Zappa, what can you say, man? The guy was a genius, absolute genius. Joe Walsh, what a melodic, wonderful player. Tommy Bolin, another great player. So, those are great choices too. And they play with soul, so they may not be playing blues per se, but Joe Walsh's biggest influence was Albert King. And, so you can hear it in his playing.
Mark,
If we move to today's era, go ahead, Willie. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say one more guy I'd throw out there. Maybe he's too much towards the end of the 70s. Mark Knopfler, does he squeak in under the 70s, or is he maybe more 80s, or maybe not at all?
Mark Knopfler is amazing, a very lyrical player. And, the thing that I'm reminded about these players are their finesse and their touch. And in today's world, it's almost like it's a supercharged sports car, it's a Ferrari. But somebody like Knopfler, man, 1 or 2 notes, and he's buried you, and yeah, you could throw him in the 70s. To me, the golden era of Dire Straits and Mark Knopfler, maybe the 80s, but I'll take him any decade, man. He's probably pretty great in the 60s too, so yeah.
Moving to today's era, who are some unsung heroes, some great guitar players on your radar that maybe don't get as much attention as maybe they should?
Well, I'll preface this by saying that I feel in our genre, most people don't get the attention that they deserve.
True, very true.
And, you guys have your guitar lists. And so, people like Philip Sayce, Eric Gales, and, these are people that are not maybe as known as, say, John Mayer, but every bit as wonderful as guitar players. So there's those guys. But then there's even kind of people that sort of don't make that list, and Davey Knowles is a guy I really, really like. And I'm not, part of me wants to say, well, maybe there's a certain reason why they're not as well known, but in terms of their artistry, I think that these are genius people. Davey Knowles is wonderful. He's very insightful. He's a very deep cat, and he can play the hell out of the guitar. Very soulful. Joanne Shaw Taylor, I think she's awesome, and she never makes number 1 on the chick list. I think she can make number 1 on the dudes list too. She's awesome. She is great. And as well as with Davey, they're the real deal, the full package. They can sing, they write, they play. Coco Montoya, here's a guy that has wonderful albums, a great singer, great guitar player. Him and Walter Trout were both with John Mayall, yet Walter seems to be enjoying more success than Coco. But in my mind, they're both guys, man. They're both awesome. A couple of Canadians, because I got to wave the flag for Canada. Steve Hill, he's a wonderful guitar player.
Great one-man band.
Yeah. I mean, he's ridiculous. Paul Delorier, another Canadian, wonderful guitar player. And also there's another guy named Hamilton Loomis, who's always seemed to fly under the radar. But I've always thought that he writes great songs and, just a great artist. So those are some people that sort of strike me. What about you guys? What are your
I've got a couple. I think one who I think is really, really underrated is Simon McBride. He's put out some really great albums. I think he's a phenomenal guitar player. It's been a while since he's put out a full-length album, but I think his stuff as far as blues rock over the past decade is really, really good. I would put that up with a lot of different artists. I think a more modern artist that's just kind of coming out in the last couple of years that I really like is Ariel Posen. I think he's a fantastic guitar player and really, really great singer-songwriter as well. Does a lot of cool slide stuff. So those are 2 guys that come to mind for me.
One of the guys, I'll sort of go with the same way that you did, Pete. I'm going to go with someone old and someone a bit newer. Doyle Bramall II. I just think he's been wonderful. I think he flew under the radar. I think he still flies under the radar. And I think people really missed out, but it's never too late. You can listen to him. And then someone who's really new, and Pete knows this, I've been raving about Ryan Perry. I think for me, I'd love his feel. He reminds me a whole lot of Howlin' Wolf, who I guess, once again, it's personal. I always loved. But those are 2 guys that come to mind. Once again, there's a bunch. Part of it's the genre, but those are just a couple.
Yeah, I mean, you really look at this entire genre, as you were saying, Anthony. There's just so many unsung heroes and artists that deserve more attention that are playing this music.
Yeah, and thanks to Blues Rock Review for getting the word out. Even your top 20 albums, your list. There were some albums and some songs I hadn't checked out, and I shared it with a bunch of my friends because it was like, this is supposed to be a lockdown and quarantine and nobody's releasing music, and there are all these great albums. So yeah, that's the wonderful thing about the service you guys are doing. So.
Yeah, it still ended up being a pretty good year.
Yeah, absolutely.
music wise?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Pete, yes.
So if we're talking about, you just mentioned about the idea of getting the word out. If I say a couple of things like Anthony Gomes and Music is the Medicine, I think everyone knows that's an album of yours. But really what maybe people are missing out on is the charity, the foundation that you have started. And I'm going to let you talk about the rest, but it's such a cool idea. And I think that the viewers are going to understand why I'm excited about this. Anthony, if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, thank you, Willie, for asking. I've always felt that I owed music a great debt because it's given so much. And I had a difficult childhood. You know, my mother suffers from mental illness, and it wasn't easy growing up. And music is probably why I'm still here. It's the thing that kept me going. And I believe to my soul that music is a healer. And we wanted to find ways to help people through music. You know, I guess we're just like hippies. You know, we still believe in that. So with some friends, we started this foundation. And so far, we've given guitars and instruction to war veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. We've raised money for music listening devices in hospitals for kids. And we did this cool thing in Montreal. A friend of mine works at a hospital there. And he said, Anthony, there's a choir that makes albums and does gigs of mentally ill patients. And my mom had actually been in that hospital. So that really resonated. And so we did a gig and we raised enough money to give them a PA so they didn't have to rent one for their gigs. And he came to our show and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. I mean, these people sing with such passion. And we went to our fans and we said, we got to do more. And we raised enough money for them to have a recording studio in the hospital. So now they can make their albums there. And one of the doctors said, and literally half his choir wouldn't be here if it wasn't for music. So it's such a powerful thing. And it reminds all of us how important music is. As an artist, you're always so consumed about, you know, your career and when you're going to go back touring and how many tickets are you selling and does anybody know who you are, you know? And what you realize is that music is a community thing, and it's just to see those people singing music and the love that they brought to it was it's so inspiring. So for whatever we have done with Music as the Medicine, it's given me so much more in return. So very proud of that. Thanks for asking me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being out here, Anthony Gomes. I mean, Pete and I were talking, if we want to start 2021 on the right foot, what better way than to have you on the show? Thanks for coming out.
Hey, thank you. And it's always a pleasure to hang with you guys. You bring a smile to my face when I watch your podcast. And you're doing such a tremendous job. So keep up the great work and keep flying the banner for blues rock.
Thanks so much, Anthony. We really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, guys.
All right, what do you guys think of the topics we discussed today? Let us know down in the comments section below. But for now, he's Willie Witten and Anthony Gomes. I'm Pete Francis. This is the Blues Rock Show. We'll see you next time.